shifting from right to left. Play action to that side. Rolling right, looking, fires in the end zone. Gonna be caught. Touchdown. That's a tight end from 15 yards out.
Welcome to the Bowl Season Stories Podcast, Season 3, Episode 8. I'm Nick Carparelli, the Executive Director of Bowl Season, and today we are joined by the Commissioner of the Atlantic Coast Conference, Jim Phillips, and former Notre Dame defensive tackle, Chris Zorich. If you missed any of our previous episodes, you can catch them on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, or anywhere else you listen to your podcasts. And if you enjoyed today's show, we'd appreciate you to like, subscribe, and drop a 5-star rating. And as always, you can follow all the bowl season news on our website, bowlseason.com, and on social media at Bowl Season. Today's show is brought to you by Sport Radar, reimagining immersive experiences for sports fans and bettors. Our first guest has over 3 decades of experience working in Division I college athletics, serving as the lead fundraiser at Tennessee and Notre Dame, before becoming the Director of Athletics at both Northern Illinois University and Northwestern University. He is currently the Commissioner of the Atlantic Coast Conference. Please welcome to the show, Jim Phillips. Jim, thanks for joining us.
Nick, glad to be here. Great to see you.
Jim, you've been the Commissioner of the ACC for over 2.5 years now. I don't know if that seems like a long time or a little bit of time. I know it's probably been a lot more eventful and unpredictable than you would have liked. But instead of talking about all the challenges, I want to ask you, you have such a great job. You do such a great job. What is it about your job that you enjoy the most?
Boy, there's so many things, Nick. What I would say is it always comes back to the student athletes and seeing the experiences that they're having, trying to provide them with the resources, to be successful through their campuses. Anytime, I guess, what I would say to that question, anytime I have a chance to watch them play and perform, to me is the best part of this job. And that certainly includes bowl season. That matters a lot to all 14 of our football playing ACC members. But it's a privilege. It really is. It's a privilege to serve 10,000 student athletes in the ACC, 15 amazing schools that I think really do try to exemplify what's right and good about college sports. Great academics, the ability to get these amazing degrees from these world-class universities, and then also play sports at a high level, and certainly in the sport of football.
Well, you mentioned bowl games a little bit. Next season, the CFP will be expanding from 4 teams to 12 teams. Everyone is excited and looking forward to that. But there are 36 other bowl games during bowl season that won't factor into the national championship equation, but are still really important. Tell us why those games are so important to the universities and student athletes.
Well, there's nothing like bowl season, Nick. There just isn't. And you've done a great job in your leadership in putting that together. There's nothing, I think, that unites college fans and certainly college football fans more than bowl season does. And the expansion of the playoff is much needed and deserves to be done. When you talk to student athletes, they want access to championships in all sports. And the 4-team system has been great, but I think the modernization calls for more access to more teams, and as you described, beginning next year going to 12. But those other 36 bowl games matter because not all, we're going to have a lot of great teams every year, and next year will be no different. And those young student athletes deserve an opportunity to go play in a wonderful bowl experience somewhere in the country. And I know firsthand, being on a college campus for the years that I did, how much that meant. And it really unifies a campus. It allows a campus to go to a new community. The stimulation economically for each of the areas that host bowl games, the ability to do community service in those areas. And then for all of us that are competitors, it's a chance to end the season with a group of seniors, no matter what team it is during bowl season, with a championship. And there's something meaningful to that. And I think both of us know enough former student athletes in the sport of football that all come back and they just say, hey, you remember when we went to this particular bowl game or that particular bowl game? I just think it's an area in college sports that we have to continue to pay attention to. We have to nurture, we have to support. And certainly there'll be maybe some new variations to it, but bowl season is just that. It's not just about a playoff. It's about all the opportunities across college football and the communities across our country that love and support the game and providing these wonderful bowl experiences.
Well, throughout your career as a college administrator, you've certainly had the opportunity to be involved in a lot of bowl games. As you mentioned, it's such a great experience for the student athlete. The fan turns the TV on, watches the game. But, these guys are in town for 4 or 5 days, experiencing a community, experiencing things that they may not have experienced otherwise, and may never have a chance to again. Thinking back at all the bowl games you've been a part of, what are some of your favorite memories from those experiences?
I would just tell you, there's just so many. I think about my time at Arizona State, and when Arizona State went to the Rose Bowl with Jake Plummer and that group, and then at Tennessee won a national championship in 1998. Notre Dame and all the experiences there. Being a first-time athletic director at Northern Illinois when we went to the Silicon Valley Bowl, which was amazing, and beat a really good Troy team. And then at Northwestern, where there was just incredible success. And an early, memory there was we broke a streak where Northwestern hadn't won a bowl game since 1949. And, it had been 60 years or 70 years. And, so those are the things that I think have meant so much to each of the schools and each of the campuses. I think just this joy of seeing the student athletes coming together and being together, knowing that this is the last week that we're going to be together, because that as soon as that game's over, everybody kind of goes their different ways, and certainly the seniors won't be back, and so the next year will be a brand new team. So again, not only the experiences I think that student athletes are having, but I think we're all fans as well. And I mean, you just love sitting back during those 4 weeks or 5 weeks, whatever it's been now, or whatever it is now, of watching bowl games and watching just competition in such a great sport of football. So like they're just filled with so many wonderful memories about bowl season.
That point you made right there, Jim, I wish the average fan could feel that and experience that. You mentioned Northwestern winning a bowl game, breaking their streak. That didn't factor into the national championship, but that didn't make it anything less meaningful or, for those kids. It's important, right? And I think this sport needs more than 12 postseason opportunities for 133 Division I programs.
No question. And I think everybody realizes that. I just do. And that's why we'll work together with the CFP and bowl season and make sure that we come out of it in a really healthy manner.
You and I were talking offline about how important it is for your conference and every conference really to do well in the non-conference games early on, because it kind of sets the tone for the season. Similarly, how important is it for the teams in your conference to perform well in bowl games?
Well, it's really important. As we've talked about prior, setting the narrative at the beginning of the season is really important. And when you have a chance to play very good non-conference teams in very good conferences and have some success, that's really a wonderful way to start the year. I'm pleased having 5 ranked teams right now. Again, as we get into a lot of conference play, but finishing the season is, I think, what every coach wants to do well, and every fan of every program in the country, as well as any commissioner. You want to see your teams develop through the year, that they're not a finished product in those early games. And as you get later in the season, you're hopeful that they're playing their very best football at the end of the season. And as I mentioned just a little bit earlier, there's nothing greater than holding a championship trophy at the end of the season. And that's, I think, why the bowl games matter, and why is it, as exciting as it is, you want to win those games at the very end. And it builds a lot of momentum when you talk to coaches and you talk with student athletes and you're on campuses. They're living off of maybe how the season ended in a positive way, and a really big bowl victory that kind of catapults them forward into the following year. So it's important at the end of the year to play well and to have success. And there's a little bit of bragging rights involved too with the conferences and how successful you are.
That's right. Well, you and I have both seen it on campus. You win a bowl game, everything's a little easier in the off season, right? You have a little extra hop in your step in off season workouts, and people are walking around the building in a good mood. It's good to win a bowl game.
For sure. No question.
Well, you've been involved with bowl season in a number of other unique ways over the years. You were a member of the Fiesta Bowl Board of Directors, as well as a member of the Rose Bowl Management Committee. Tell us about your positions with those two bowls and what you learned from them that maybe you couldn't have known otherwise.
Well, it really, Nick, relates to the amount of work that goes into putting together a bowl game and the amount of community support and what it means to those communities. Those are really the big takeaways. Uh, Economic development, as I mentioned earlier, is significant for these areas. The ability to help businesses that may be struggling, restaurants, hotels, just normal activities that this stimulus of individuals coming to a place over a 3 or 4 or 5 day period. But I think what I found out more is just what those bowl officials and the bowls do for those communities in the sense of community service work and trying to give back, whether it's a homeless shelter, a women's shelter, the YM or YWCAs. There's just a whole host of ways where there's a residual from a bowl game that really starts with these bowl associations. And you mentioned the Rose Bowl Management Committee and the Fiesta Bowl, and you learn a lot. And certainly there's a business side of it as well, and sponsorships that you can't do any of these bowl games without, and the media piece of it, with folks like ESPN, who've been just such an incredible partner during bowl season. So it's a really complex structure with people that are really committed to those experiences that we've been talking about to make sure that the student athletes and fans have a wonderful experience. So I'll continue to try to do anything I can to help during bowl season. And again, the ACC is proud to be a member of FBS football and to be the recipient of many of these kinds of trips and many of these kinds of experiences.
We're going to shift gears here for a couple questions, Jim. We're in the NIL era, whether we like it or not. As a result, you've spoke on the idea of financial literacy for student athletes. From your standpoint, what does the ideal version of that look like? And why do you think it's so important for student athletes to be financially literate now more than ever?
Well, I think the stakes continue to be really high. And now that student athletes are able to monetize their abilities and their name and their image and again, their God-given talents, they're able to create some wealth for themselves and maybe for their families, depending on who it is. And literacy and financial literacy is critical because there are bad actors out there. There are people trying to take advantage of student athletes, and the ability to provide them with educational opportunities, knowledge-based, about what the things they should be thinking about, what are the things they need to be concerned about, careful with, etc. And I give an awful lot of credit to the NCAA and Charlie Baker, who's made this one of the priorities. And at a recent NCAA council meeting, they're providing more and more support for financial literacy, as well as our campuses. At the end of the day, the campuses remain the direct connection to these student athletes. And so I'm proud of what I'm seeing across the country, and certainly proud of the ACC and what I'm seeing in our schools in that area, Nick. But again, you and I have spoken about this in the past. It's really important in this modernization of college athletics that there is literacy programs for our student athletes.
No doubt about it, Jim. Well, you're sitting in your new home right now, the ACC's new home, in the Queen City of Charlotte, North Carolina. How did that move come about? And what were some of the reasons Charlotte was selected as the new home of the ACC?
Well, it was a review of the conference office when I took over, and some conversations with the presidents. And then I'll never forget I went to our 15 schools in about 21 days, and it was kind of a listening tour. And one of the things that they talked about was, it was difficult at times for some of them to get to the conference office. And we've had a wonderful relationship, and it will always be the home of the ACC, and that's the city of Greensboro, North Carolina. Just a beautiful place, incredibly committed to the ACC. And so we went through an exercise, no predetermined outcomes, really a very transparent process. And we looked to, a consultant to help us create a metrics of the things that would be important for us to consider and where we would want the future home of the ACC to be. And that included the city of Greensboro after a 12-month period, Nick, where we brought our presidents, our ADs, our faculty athletics reps, and our senior women's administrators to the table in different ways. We selected Charlotte, and I would just say there's multiple reasons, but 3 or 4 are the ability to access your membership from an ACC perspective. We began this amazing conference on May 8th, 1953, with 7 schools in the Mid-Atlantic. Now we're at 15 schools all the way up and down the Eastern Seaboard and into Indiana with Notre Dame, and into the state of Kentucky with Louisville. And as you know, we've just added 3 more schools, 2 in the Bay Area, Cal and Stanford, and SMU down in Dallas-Fort Worth. So having an international airport, being able to access your schools, and your schools being able to access the conference office, very important. That's one. Second, the recruitment and retention of talent in a really vibrant, growing city, in a really diverse, populated city. Charlotte has that, and it's been, just an exceptional transition for us. Third, the ability to interface with Fortune 100, 200, 500 companies. We've gotten off to a wonderful start there as well. And so just the financial landscape of partnerships in the business community, the media piece of it, to have and be involved in a city like Charlotte that has such a large media presence. I mean, there's a whole host of things. And again, it's not anything in a critical way of our past or where we were in Greensboro, because again, I love living there for the 2.5 years that I've been commissioner. It will always be the original home of the ACC. We'll still have some championships there, but we are incredibly excited about it. And this is the right place for us to be as we modernize the office, as we continue to try to brand the office and market the conference and brand it. It's just been a fantastic connection, and you'll see championships here as well. And we've had our football championship is the first Saturday of every December at Bank of America Stadium here in Charlotte, the home of the Panthers, and so it's been a really seamless transition, and we're really excited about the future home here in Charlotte.
Jim, you and I have been friends a long time. We've worked together on a couple of occasions. It's my job to have a good relationship with you, so you knew these questions weren't going to be too hard. But for the final question, I'd like to at least make it a little bit thought-provoking for you. In this time of great change and unpredictability in college athletics, what do you think or hope the next 12 months has in store for us?
I hope we get some stability. It's been an unstable time in the industry. It just has, for a variety of reasons, not only expansion, but the legal issues, some of the major transformational work that we did at the NCAA, NIL, the transfer portal per se, just lots of things that have been new to the system. And a few of these things we still have to get ironed out. So I hope we can regain some of that stability. And most importantly, I hope we can turn our attention to the student athletes, the teams, the coaches across the country, and certainly in the sport of football. And let's divert some of the other attention that's been going in different directions back to where it really belongs. And I am excited about the future. I am. And college athletics is something for all of us to fight for. I know you fight for it from a bowl system standpoint and a bowl season standpoint. I certainly try to do the same and fight for it with my colleagues. There's no greater enterprise when you think about access and affordability of higher education to a group of young men and women in college sports that may not have had access to higher ed and may not have been able to afford it based on their socioeconomic background. We have 500,000 student athletes. Less than 1% will play professional sports. I think continuing to understand that this is about student athletes and making sure that we're supporting them at every turn is going to continue to be important. So I'm excited about the future in the next 12 months and certainly want to do my part like you do to help any way we can.
Great final words there, Jim. Well, really appreciate your time. I know you well enough that you're always going 100 miles an hour. I can't thank you enough for how supportive you've always been about the bowl system and the individual bowl games. No one in intercollegiate athletics understands the importance to the student athletes that these bowl games have than you. And also really want to thank you for the job you do in general for college football and college athletics. You are a really asset to this industry, and we're very lucky to have you. So thank you for that, Jim.
Thanks, Nick. My privilege, my pleasure for sure.
Take care.
All right. Thanks.
The forecast for this tax season? It's going to rain refunds. Lots of refunds. File for less and get more with TaxAct, the official tax filing software of bowl season. Go to taxact.com to get started today.
Our next guest played defensive tackle for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish from 1987 to 1991. He went on to play 7 seasons in the NFL with the Chicago Bears and the Washington Redskins, and was inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame in 2007, the youngest person ever to be inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame. Please welcome to the show, Chris Zorich. Chris, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you very much, Nick. I am honored to be part of this awesome show. Thank you.
You know, we just had Commissioner Phillips on, and just talking to you, offline here, it just dawned on me we have 2 Chicago natives on the same show. That wasn't our intention, but Chicago pride
Jim is a great guy. Jim is an absolutely great guy, and was very instrumental in assisting me with getting the Chicago State athletic director job. After I kind of talked to him about, salary and ideas, and he was kind enough to schedule a couple basketball games with us, so that was great.
Awesome. Not surprised. Not surprised he gives back and mentors people like that. Well, let's kick this off by talking about your back-to-back performances in the 90 and 91 Orange Bowls, which ultimately resulted in you being inducted into the Orange Bowl Hall of Fame in 2009. Tell us about those 2 bowl games and what they meant to your football career.
It's really interesting. The first one we won, and the second we wound up losing, but it was interesting because the first one was for the 89 season, and in 88 we won the national championship, and in 89 we lost 1 game against Miami Hurricanes, and after that game, that was the last game of our year, and obviously we were upset, dejected. We had a chance to go on to win, possible back-to-back national championships. And then the only way that we felt we could redeem ourselves is having a great bowl performance. And we were very fortunate to go to the Orange Bowl. And I'm not sure all the excitement around it, but it was by far one of the best experiences I had ever had at that point, going to a bowl. Even though we won the national championship in the Fiesta Bowl, having a chance to go to the Orange Bowl was just an amazing, amazing experience. I mean, just the idea that you get this kid from the south side of Chicago who, before college, had never been on a plane before. And so you can imagine the idea of being in this environment where it's pageantry, it's college athletics, and just kind of the idea of traveling and being involved in a different community. And as I learned later, so many things that are surrounded around a bowl game. As players, we just show up. I had no idea that there were so many events throughout the year that culminate to this bowl game. So again, fortunate in 90 Orange Bowl, had a great game. And then fast forward the following year, we had a chance to go back, and we wound up playing the same opponent in Colorado, and Colorado wound up winning the game by 1 point, but I had just a monster game. I mean, I think I had like 2 or 3 sacks, and we had a bunch of tackles. It was amazing. And then after the game, my mom was watching back home in Chicago on TV, and I actually mentioned her watching the game back in Chicago. So after the game, I had a chance to talk to her, and she was excited that they mentioned her name, and I told her that we lost, and she's like, "Yeah, but you played so well. You got MVP," and it was an awesome experience. Unfortunately, what I didn't know, but that would be the last time I would see that I would talk to my mom. Unfortunately, after the game, I talked to my mom, said, "Bye, I love you." She said, "Bye, I love you too." And that was the last time, because she had actually passed away of a heart attack in between the phone call and the time that I got back home. But it was an amazing experience, and the idea that my life is tied to Notre Dame and the Orange Bowl has just been great.
Well, obviously, to a large extent, you can control what you do on the field, but what you can't control sometimes as much is your team's performance. So you were fortunate enough to achieve what few can say they have, a college football national championship, and you only have a few years to try it, and then you graduate and you move on. What was that season like in 1988, and what are some of the life lessons you've taken with you from that team, as well as from attending the University of Notre Dame in general?
Well, I mean, it would all have to really kind of circles around Coach Holtz. And I had never heard of Notre Dame before when I was in high school. There's this story I tell that people kind of laugh when I tell them, but when the coach from Notre Dame came to my high school, in my high school in Chicago is 90 miles from the South Bend campus and Notre Dame. I mean, you jump on the Skyway, you're there in 90 minutes. And he asked me how I would like to attend the University of Notre Dame. I said, "Sir, I would love to, but my mom doesn't like to fly." And he's kind of looking at me like, "Well, what do you mean your mom doesn't like to fly? You guys are like, I mean, what's going on here?" And I was like, "Well, there's no way my mom would fly to France to see me play." And he was like, "What?" I was like, "Well, yeah, you guys got the hunchback guy in that big church, right?" And he was like, "Ooh." I'm sure he kind of looked at my transcript going, "Oh, what's this kid's SAT score?" It was just kind of an interesting story. But again, I came from an environment where kids didn't go to college. There were a lot of gangs, a lot of violence and stuff like that. So the idea of going to college really wasn't, I never saw anyone go. So it was never an issue.
Let alone Notre Dame, right? As close as it was, it might as well have been
right.
away to you.
Worlds away, Nick. And it was great though, because this experience really changed my life. Having a chance to go there, yes, we had success there, but if you take the football part out of it, I was very fortunate, because literally that university changed my life. When you throw football back into it, we just so happened to win a national championship in Lou Holtz's third year there, my sophomore year. And that in itself was just an amazing ride. No one really knew we were going to be that successful. Everybody thought it was going to be the next year. And so being a sophomore, having a chance to be a starter was a great experience. My first game, I think I jumped off sides like 4 times. I was so nervous. I got kicked out of a couple of games that year for being a little bit too aggressive. But surrounding it was a mixture of kind of young kids who had this kind of chip on their shoulder, this attitude, and kind of older veterans that had been through a lot in Notre Dame. Because when you think about the coach before Lou Holtz, it was God, what's his name?
Jerry Faust.
Yeah, Jerry Faust. Sorry. And I mean, they weren't that good. And talking to the players, there was a lot of dissension in the locker room. There were a lot of issues surrounding the team, especially Faust's last couple of years. And so you mix those guys who, by the way, got beat by Miami like 58-7, and then you have these younger kids who literally were recruited by Miami. I mean, I was supposed to take a trip to Miami, but I wound up canceling it after I committed to Notre Dame. But the idea that we kind of saw them as peers, not necessarily kind of adversaries. And so having a chance to play them, we just thought, hey, this is going to be a great game, great competitors. And we wound up winning that game. And literally that game was a lot harder than being able to win against West Virginia and Major Harris in the Fiesta Bowl. And I only say that because we didn't know what was going on at the time. We didn't realize Miami, I think, was 1 and we were 3 or something like that. And the idea that we had a chance to play the number 1 team in the country was this great honor. And then all of a sudden that mantle came to us. And then we realized that now we're getting everybody's best game. And so the game right before we played West Virginia in the Fiesta Bowl, we played a number 2 USC team. So you talk about playing a number 1 team, playing a number 2 team, and then at the time playing a great West Virginia team. And Major Harris, he's in the College Football Hall of Fame as well. He was an amazing player. So that journey that year was just an amazing experience. And then you culminate that with being at the Fiesta Bowl. And I thought what was so interesting, when they have these bowl experiences, let's say, right, where the teams kind of hang out together, depending on where you're at, you do events and everything. And I remember vividly that year, actually, they have a big banquet with both teams. And no one fought or anything, we're in our tie and our suits and everything. And the coaches speak. So West Virginia's coach went first, and then Coach Holtz went second. And for the first coach, everybody clapped. Their players clapped, we clapped. And then Holtz does his thing, but then he ends with the magic trick where he rips the piece of, he rips the newspaper up. And so he ends with that, and boom, he opens it up, and we shot up in our seats, start clapping. And then people on West Virginia's teams, they stood up and start clapping. And we were like, well, we already have this game won then. If they're standing up cheering for our coach, then we definitely won this game.
When you won the national championship that year, could you have ever believed that we would be sitting here 35 years later waiting for the Irish to win their next one?
Ooh, Nick, thank you, man. That's
could be a complicated answer.
How much time we got here? It's been frustrating, only because we came so close in '89. Again, only losing 1 game that year. So we expected that this was going to be an ongoing thing. And we weren't even like Holtz's best team. When you look at it, like I think that '93 team where he had like 7 guys go in the first round of the NFL draft, like that's crazy that Holtz was able to get that type of talent. And that's the type of success we had. Now, unfortunately, from there, it's been kind of downhill. And Marcus is doing a great job. Coach Freeman's doing a great job now. But the fact that you're talking about 35 years later is kind of embarrassing.
For a Notre Dame program. Yeah. I would have bet big money that you'd win at least 1 more in the next
one. I'm thinking like 10 or 12 at least. We got 0. So that's the frustrating part.
Are you happy with Coach Freeman and the direction of the program right now?
The former players are so excited. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that he was a player as well. He was a stud, actually. He was a 4-star player. Ward number 1 was a great linebacker at Ohio State. And actually, he competed, I think, for a national championship 1 year, right? And so he understands that level and understands what former players mean to the program. Now, I don't know exactly what they did at Ohio State, but Coach Freeman has been able to create what is called the Legacy Weekend, and it's surrounded around our spring game, where he invites a whole bunch of players back. We have dinner with the current players. We have a career session with the current players. It's just a great experience. And the first year, people were a little hesitant. We had about 120, 140 guys come in. Last year, we had 300 guys show up. And, Notre Dame's not paying for anything. They're not giving us free hotel rooms. I mean, this is on our dime. But there's a lot of people that believe in what he's doing. And, there's been a lot of guys who haven't had a chance to come down because of kids and families and everything else. But knowing that Coach Freeman has our back as former players is great. And then he also created an environment where he has a podcast, or excuse me, he does this huge Zoom call with several hundred former players, and it kind of gives us an update 2 times a year, which I think is great.
That's awesome. I've never heard a coach doing that. That's amazing. Well, we talked about Chicago earlier, right? You grew up there, drafted by the Bears, played all but 1 year of your career there until recently. You continued to to live there until you moved to be closer to your daughter in college in Indiana. I guess you didn't want to fly to Indiana to
Right.
so you had to move there. But what is it about the city of Chicago that you love so much and has caused you to live there virtually your entire life?
You know, I was just so fortunate as a young man. Just my mom and I, although we grew up in a rough neighborhood, I grew up in a rough neighborhood. You know, I was spoiled with love, and you know, my mom never remarried, so it was just me and her for 21 years. And the idea that I grew up poor wasn't really part of our conversations. It was all about kind of support and love, and that's why, like, I wanted to go to a vocational school, which is what my high school was, so I can get a job and get my mom out of the neighborhood. Now, it just so happens that I went to the same high school as Dick Buckus went to, but I didn't know that because I didn't start playing football until my sophomore year in high school. And it wasn't until my going in or after my junior year that the coaches thought I might have a chance to kind of get a scholarship. And so I came back and talked to my mom about it, and she's like, "Wow, that's terrific. You have a chance to go to college. You'll be the first person in our family to ever go to college. This will be a great experience for you." So there are a lot of sacrifices my mom and I had to make going into my senior year, and I realized about how serious this opportunity was. And so growing up in Chicago was this amazing experience. And then going to Notre Dame, my mom had a chance to see all the home games. And then, unfortunately, my mom passed away in January. But then a couple months later, I get drafted by the Bears, which is my hometown team. And then all of a sudden, like, I'm playing for the team that I grew up watching. Like, who does that? And oh, by the way, I went to college like 90 minutes away. So I had this amazing, amazing experience. And you know, I'm so fortunate because if not for football, I'm not sure where I'd be. And so football changed my life. Going to the University of Notre Dame changed my life. But then you put that cherry on top, and oh, by the way, Mike Ditka, who I grew up watching, like, drafts me in the second round, and I'm a Chicago Bear for 7 years. It's just an amazing, amazing experience.
So I want to talk some more about your bowl game experiences. We mentioned the national championship in the '89 Fiesta Bowl, as well as the 2 Orange Bowls after that. As a freshman, you were on the scout team, but you went to the Cotton Bowl in '88. Now, you've played in a lot of big games in your career in the NFL. You know, we talked a lot about those regular season games. That Miami game you referenced, they made a documentary about it. That was the Catholics versus Convicts game, and then there was a rematch, you know, at home 2 years later. But tell me, how do the bowl game experiences compare to some of the biggest games that you've played in your life?
So,
and Chris, talk about and also, talk about the experience. You as a Chicago kid who doesn't sound like you were traveling the globe very much, right? So I'm talking about, the game itself, the bowl game, but also that 5-6 days and what the experiences that those gave you.
Sure. So I'm going to talk about that, but I have this bowl experience that I didn't realize the importance of it until 10, 20 years later. So you mentioned before that I didn't play at all my freshman year, and I was so at Notre Dame, if we went to a bowl game, all the starters and important players, they would go on the 7-week trip. And the non-important players like myself, who was on the scout team, we'd go on the 3-day trip. So, but all year I was on the scout team and I practiced against our first team center, who was an All-American. And we wound up losing the game against Texas A&M. And I came back into the locker room. I was crying because I was upset that we lost. No problem, right? Okay, whatever. 20 years later, one of my buddies come up to me and says, "Hey, I didn't know you cried after the Texas A&M game in the Cotton Bowl." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He was like, "Well, I just read Lou Holtz's book. You should check it out." And I'm like, "What?" Of course, I'm not going to read my head coach's book. That, I mean, it's. I mean, I experienced it every day, so I'm not going to. Right, yeah. Exactly. So I go back and I read this section, and I just start getting tears in my eyes because he talked about how after the game, after this loss in the Cotton Bowl, he comes in the locker room And I'm the only person crying that we lost. Now, I'm sure other people were upset, but I'm in my locker kind of heaving. And I again had no idea that this happened, but he said at that moment, he realized that he wanted to put, and he called me a fire eater, he wanted to put fire eaters like Chris Zorich out on the field for next year, and talked about how that was the impetus of what he wanted to do in the future, and that aggressiveness and that type of desire and that will to win. Had no clue. Had I not gone to the Cotton Bowl, that would have not have happened. But it's just this experience that I realized 20 years later that happened. And I talked to Coach Holtz about it, and he would laugh and say, yes, I looked at you, you were crying. I was like, that guy didn't even play. He did not even play in the game. He needs to be out in the field. I need to find people like him. So that was the Cotton Bowl story. But the stories after that, the bowl games after that, as you mentioned, I never experienced anything like these things. So you come down there, you have a chance to spend a week in a different city. There's parades, there's events, you're meeting other players. I mean, I think, and I know we talked about this a couple of years ago, but the bowl experience for these student athletes is so important, because it not only does it reward them for a great season, it gives you an opportunity to kind of experience different things. I mean, there's the Bahamas Bowl, there's bowl games that are not in the Midwest, unfortunately, because of the weather. But the exciting part is that you have a chance to kind of think about achieving going to a big bowl game, or going to a bowl where you know it's going to be a great experience. And like I said, you get a poor kid from the south side of Chicago to experience the bowl experience. It's amazing. Then you get down there and there's gifts for you. And it was funny because you don't have a lot of money in college. And so we would actually use like the sweats that we got like for the bowl games. Like we would wear those like all year round, And so when we wore when we wore the ones from the Fiesta Bowl, we'd always nod at each other because that's the game that we won the national championship with. So, it's these experiences outside of the game, which is great, right? But it's all these experiences that you have because normally you don't get it. And then even if you're talking about a smaller school locally, how far are you traveling? If you're in a smaller conference, then all of a sudden you win games, or you're able to be bowl eligible. I mean, that's an exciting feeling, because you talk to the teams that aren't bowl eligible, they're pissed. Especially if they've had a taste, or especially if they've gone to a bowl game the year before. It's that unspoken word in the back of your mind going, we got to be bowl eligible. We have to be bowl eligible because we're going to get this great experience. That's from the player side. Now the coaches love it because now that's more practice time, right? There's more time they can go out there and get us, ready for the next season.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot, Chris. You're spot on. Like that student athlete experience. We live in a day and age where everybody's chasing the money, but it's the experiences, it's the memories that stick with you a lifetime. And look, even with the new playoff, 12 teams, right? There's only so many programs in the country that have a legitimate chance of being in that group. Sure. There's 130 that play FBS football, right? Whether you're a student athlete that works just as hard as every other one and needs to be rewarded and for your achievement, or if you're a program trying to build and get to that playoff level. You can't go from not having any postseason experience, none of those practices, as you said, and get to the playoffs. So these games are still so meaningful, and
absolutely,
fans love watching them. It's one of the most popular times of year on the American sports calendar.
Absolutely, and even me as a fan, I mean, as soon as the games are released, I put it on my calendar, and so I'm watching every one. If I can't watch it, I'll put on the DVR to watch it later. I mean, it's just because I know how these kids feel. And one other thing I wanted to comment on is you talk to every kid that's been to a bowl game. I guarantee you they don't remember all the games they played that senior year or that year, but I guarantee you they remember that bowl game. And I don't care what bowl it was. You ask them about, hey, what was it like playing the second game of the year? You're like, yeah, I don't remember that, but I went to the Orange Bowl, or I went to the Fiesta Bowl, or it's these experiences that you guys create, that these bowls create, that are very memorable, and that's something that is so important for the college experience for these student athletes.
No doubt about it. But before we move on, you mentioned that Miami game in '88. You kind of had a sequel to the Catholics versus Convicts in '90. And you're not going to remember this, but at the conclusion of that game, this photo was taken.
Oh my God.
And there's a skinny kid in the blue jacket standing next to you.
I see.
That might look vaguely familiar.
Vaguely.
That was
God.
right after that Miami game in 1990.
Yeah, great, man. You had a lot of hair back then too, man.
Yeah, I know. We were there because your head manager that year, Sean Wilkes, is a really good friend of mine. And we were visiting my friend there on the far right, Rob Burke. He lived in Dillon Hall, I think. So I don't know how we got in the locker room, but we got to meet you then. And little did we know that how many years later we'd be on a podcast together.
That is that is crazy. That is crazy. Wow. That's an awesome experience. And that's what's so fun about it, is that you have a chance to kind of see those memorable moments. And I'm sure you guys had a blast. It's the idea, and so I can't even imagine like the fan side. And so if I could real quickly talk about, and I don't know if you were going to talk about this, but when I was inducted into the Orange Bowl Hall of Fame, I had a chance to experience kind of the bowl game, not being a player. And Nick, let me tell you, that experience, that's when I really kind of understood what went into a bowl game, because they brought me and I brought my college roommate because we experienced every bowl game together, and I wanted him to experience this as well. So he accompanied me to the Orange Bowl Hall of Fame event, and we got there during the week. We did everything the players did, and we did the parades, we did everything else, but so much goes into bowl games. I had no idea. And especially the Orange Bowl, because it is a year-round event for them. I mean, they have like regattas, they have fundraisers throughout the year, they have everything culminates at the end of the year for that game. And there's so many people that are involved. And we were stunned. We were like, what? We just thought it was a week. We're like, what? All this? It was just an amazing experience.
Yeah, it is for sure. And as you mentioned earlier, you got 40 of those communities across the country that are just so proud to have these games every year.
And it's so, and again, I mean, being on committees, making sure they actually happen. A lot of folks don't understand what goes into these games. And at the end of the day, think about it. They don't know what team is going to be in their game in the beginning of the year. But regardless of who it is, they're working hard throughout the whole year to make sure those two teams have a great experience.
Last question for you. I want you to talk a little bit about your post-football career. You went back to Notre Dame to get your law degree. You were an athletic director for a few years. Tell our listeners what you're doing nowadays. What takes up most of your time on a daily basis?
Sure. So, and this kind of goes back to my experience in Chicago. Halfway through my last year, I was cut by the Bears. And a couple of days later, I signed with the Washington Redskins. And I could have had a chance to play maybe 2 more years. But I realized that football for me was in Chicago. And I wasn't in Chicago anymore. So this is selfish on my part, but I retired because I didn't have that passion, that desire for me, because I felt like I was playing for the city of Chicago. I felt like I was playing for every fan that was a fan of the Chicago Bears, because I was a fan myself. So I had plans to go to law school, but after I got cut, I kind of fast-tracked it. And I think about how young and naive I was, I guess, because I look back on it now. I was 28 years old. I was single. I had retired at 28 from a profession. And instead of going back to Chicago to hang out and have a good time, hang out with my buddies and live an amazing single life in Chicago, I decided to go to law school at Notre Dame. Like, who does that? So, needless to say, it was a very eye-opening experience for me. After graduation, worked at a law firm for a little bit, realized that it wasn't for me. And around that time, the athletic director at Notre Dame at the time, Kevin White.
Kevin White.
Yep, exactly. Talked to me about maybe coming back, because I had a great story. playing for Notre Dame, having success, playing in the pros, having success, going to law school. He thought I'd be a great example for the student athletes. However, it took him about a year to convince me that I should move back to South. Because at first I was like, I'll do it, but I gotta live in Chicago. And he was like, nope, can't do that. I need you here. So I was like, wow. So it took him about 8 months to a year to convince me that I could come back to Notre Dame and work. Because being an adult in South Bend was a little different than being a student athlete or a student. So he convinced me to come back, had a great time there, and realized that I love being a college administrator. I was fascinated by the assistance or the importance of what happens for student athlete. So I mentioned before about how it takes a village to put a bowl game on. Well, it takes a village to put a team on the field. Any team, lacrosse, basketball, whatever sport it is, it takes a bunch of people supporting it in order for those student athletes to compete. So for me, that's what I loved about it. I love the logistics of getting the student athletes to games, training table, the academic support, everything that goes around putting or fielding a team, whatever team that is. I was fascinated by that. So I wanted to kind of branch off on my own. So I wound up becoming an athletic director at a community college around the Chicago area, went back to Chicago. And then a couple years after that became the athletic director at a Division I school called Chicago State in Chicago. Had a chance to spend some time there, had a lot of success there, and really kind of understood the importance of the big schools playing the smaller schools, because a lot of funding comes to the smaller schools that way. So that's kind of important as well. And then it's also the experience for our student athletes going to places like Northwestern, Notre Dame, University of Illinois, things like that. And then there was a transition with the new president. So spent some time with her and realized that we had two different opinions on athletics. And so during that time, I was being recruited by a search firm. And the first phone call I got, I thought it was going to be for another AD job. But they're like, no, have you ever thought about being an executive recruiter? And I was like, well, no. Guys, hey, I think you'll be great at it. So we had a long conversation. Needless to say, I'm currently working for Randall Partners, which is an executive search firm. And I love it because it has nothing to do with athletics. Like, I'm not looking for college coaching jobs. I'm looking for CEOs, VPs, and really kind of understanding that there's a whole world out there outside of athletics, which I had spent so much time in.
Awesome. Chris, you got a great story. I really appreciate your time. I appreciate you joining us. You and I don't get a chance to catch up enough, but I want to make sure that the young football fans who are listening to this understands that when you watch Sports Center, College Game Day nowadays, and you see these college players that have personality and are great players, and they're built up to be these mythical figures. In 1988, 89, 90, there was no bigger mythical college football figure out there that people watched and rooted for than Chris Zorich. I can assure you that.
Well, thank you very much. And honestly, for me, and I want to jump back on the Bulls for a second. I mean, these experiences are so amazing. So when I was an administrator at Notre Dame, they were talking about how we should treat our bowl representatives, and so there was a bowl committee. And so I'm the first one to raise my hand and say, I'll do it. And I would get in the golf cart, I would drive the bowl representatives around, and I would talk to them and let them know, like, these experiences that you're creating, and I'm sure you've talked to a lot of people, but you're talking to a guy who was a player and now is an administrator. And so we had these conversations of how important things like this were, because these, and I can't stress it enough to you. I mean, obviously, but a lot of folks out there, it's a really complicated process. And so when you have teams, because I remember, like, we would have teams come with like our teams of bowl representatives, they'd come in like a yellow jacket, or they come in a green jacket and an orange. And so for us, when we would win, the players would talk about, hey, what color is going to show up this time? And depending on the color of the jacket that the bowl representative wore, it was like, oh yeah, well, we're good. We know we're going to this game. And so I would share these experiences with these bowl reps, and they would laugh and everything like that. But, it was just kind of my way of giving back to the 4 games that I had a chance to participate in and experience, and let the bowl reps know, like how important, like being able to kind of just create kind of a small experience, or when kids go to their room the first time, there'd be a little thing, a little basket of like snacks or something like that, just saying, hey, welcome to the Orange Bowl, welcome to the Fiesta Bowl. I mean, things like that mean a lot. And that's why I'm saying, like, you talk to a kid to a T, every kid's going to remember their bowl experience. They're not going to remember, some of the games during the season, but they definitely will remember their bowl experience.
Thank you for sharing that, Chris. You're the best. Really appreciate your time, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Sounds great, Nick. Thank you.
Well, that'll do it for this week's podcast. Today's guests were brought to you by Tap It. Understand how going cashless builds loyalty, engages fans, and boosts your bottom line. If you missed any of our past episodes, you can catch them on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, or anywhere else you listen to your podcasts. And if you enjoyed today's show, we'd appreciate you to like, subscribe, and drop a 5-star rating. And as always, you can follow all the bowl season news on our website, bowlseason.com, and on social media @bowlseason. Thanks for listening.